Thank you very much, everyone, and welcome. I'm just going to introduce our two guest speakers here today. We have Charlotte Valeur, and I'm very happy to have Charlotte online. And we have Patrice Lasserre, and Patrice is the person who's going to be offering this course. And as this event is our showcase of a new course that we've endorsed as the Good Governance Academy. So if I can just introduce Charlotte. Charlotte is a corporate governance expert and a keen advocate for diversity in the boardroom. She has extensive portfolio career of a number of non-executive directorships and chair roles, chairpersonship. Over the last decade, Charlotte has been a director of 7 public companies, including 3 appointments as chair. Charlotte also has broad experience with a range of unlisted companies, including international engineering firms, pension funds, and of course the chair of the IOD in the UK. She is also founder and chair of Board Apprentice. If I can just introduce Patrice then. Welcome, Charlotte. And Patrice is a chartered director from South Africa and has served on the boards of various organizations for more than 25 years. This has given him an extensive knowledge and experience in corporate governance and in the functioning of boards of directors. He spent his time in diverse organizations in South Africa as well as Europe, including telecommunications, IT, consulting, and various others, and the public sector. During his professional career, he traveled across many countries around the world, and this has really given him profound insights to all the different cultures and the diversity that needs to be represented on boards. So without further ado, I'd like to hand over to Patrice and Charlotte, and I'll hand over to you, Charlotte, just to chair the event. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Caroline, and welcome everyone. And hello again, Patrice. I'm delighted to have an opportunity to have a chat to you again. We're going to talk about a variety of different things today that draws on all your experience that you've had over the years, and I will intercept with some of my experience as well, and hopefully we can part with knowledge that people can learn from, and also show why having conversations and mentoring and sharing experiences is important for everybody, and you should never stop doing that, no matter where in your life you are. So welcome, Patrice. And just to sort of start it out, Board Whisperers, how did that come about? I like the title.
Yeah, thank you, Charlotte, and hello to everybody. Well, we all know that corporate governance, particularly over the past 2 decades, has experienced an amazing progression. And as a consequence, being a director has now become a true profession. And many courses, training are available to help us know the nuts and bolts of what's happening. But we found that although they were absolutely vital, they were not enough. We have to address the human side of things, to look at the behavior, to look at the mindset that is required to be a director. And that's where mentoring comes in play, and hence the creation of the Board Whisperer, which stays in the background, but he is there to help. And basically our motto is to help young leaders to become compelling candidates to be invited to serve on boards.
Fantastic. It is a subject that I'm talking about a lot, around young leaders and making sure we bring up the right group of people that has appropriate diversity and difference of thought as well. There's also a way of being that you just mentioned on, and I often hear people say they're sitting on boards, where I generally say I'm serving on boards. What do you feel? Do you sit or do you serve on a board, and what's the difference?
I think the difference is pretty fundamental. There is a dynamic. Sitting is extremely static. And it's actually static to the extreme that I still remember a board meeting about 20 years ago, 25 years ago, where we suddenly heard a very loud snoring. And one of the directors had physically fallen asleep.
Lovely.
that is my view of sitting on a board. Serving is really to be there, not as a pompous people knowing everything, but really as a service to the organization. It also implies, I already mentioned the professionalism, but it implies learning, continuous learning, because it needs knowledge, but knowledge is a moving target. We need to keep running after it.
Absolutely, absolutely. I'm a big subscriber to servant leadership, and because I feel, for me, that's the most appropriate way to lead, which is effectively serving other people. When you create the environment to make other people successful, that's the best you can do, in my view. But it's people have different opinions, and it's why do you feel that directors should have or even want mentoring? What are the key points you would feel that is really important to bring forward of why people should do that, directors specifically?
Well, they realize that, first of all, becoming a director is very competitive. Jobs are not advertised. You need to have a good network. So you need to be mentored on how to build that network, how to make yourself visible on the market and get the people to know that you're available and you're capable. That is certainly one aspect. There is a second one, which just escapes me right now.
I think the whole exchange of knowledge is important as well, isn't it? That you actually can have someone who has some knowledge that you don't have, that exchanges that knowledge with you.
There is actually, yes, sorry for that lapse of memory. There is also the very much the exchange of experience, because that's what working in team is about, is complete each other and exchange what we know and share very freely. You know, don't keep it for ourselves. That's important to me. And it's another aspect to answer your question about why mentoring. Mentoring is actually should be even more catching than the COVID. Once you have been mentored, you become a mentor yourself and you mentor around you. And I think that's very important, particularly in our age of transformation. We can't afford to change boards of directors one person at a time. You need to get as many people as we can. And that's what, among many, many other people, you and I have chosen as a profession just to do that.
Yeah.
But we need more of us.
We do, and only through sharing knowledge and parting. I remember back in the 80s, it was all like knowledge is power, and people held on to it. They didn't share it. But I think in today's world, knowledge is shared relatively freely with technology as well. But I think on one-to-ones with people where you share, and it's always a two-way sharing, isn't it? I have young people that mentor me, for example, because they have knowledge that I don't have. And I very much subscribe to what I heard someone say: always assume that the person in front of you knows something that you don't know, even if it's a child. And I think if we subscribe to that, we keep learning. So what do you feel that many directors today need above everything? What is one of the key things that you feel many directors should need today?
Well, you know, there is certainly several things. But there are a few constant. There is certainly something that has been there all the time. Even in the old days, I remember something that a very experienced director told me, and it was about 1985, which is quite a while ago. I asked him, actually we're having lunch, and I asked him, what's the major quality for a director? And he said courage. Yeah. And indeed, and he was defining courage as the ability to make decisions that may affect you negatively, and not necessarily be safe. And I think that that's very valid today. And it's supported by the law, because in most countries, it's not acceptable to sit on the fence.
Yes.
You need to vote for or against. And if you sit on the fence, you are assumed to have agreed with it.
That's right.
That's forced courage, but I like to see voluntary courage. And I think many people have that.
In an ideal world, we get more of that, but I often say to directors who says, oh, can we have in the minutes that I didn't vote for or against this or that? And I was like, well, it doesn't make any difference because we have collective responsibility. So whatever you do when you're in the room you are part of, unless you step off the board, because you can't stand behind what the board just agreed. But there is no such thing as staying neutral in the boardroom, right? It doesn't, as you said, no such thing as sitting on the fence. You've got to have an opinion. If you're someone who doesn't like making decisions, I wouldn't suggest that being a director is the best you could do for yourself.
Yeah,
but
absolutely. And to paraphrase what you said a few minutes ago, actually sharing is power today.
Yeah,
the more
absolutely.
You share, the more you are powerful.
Absolutely, I completely agree. And also, so we talked last time, we talked about values as well. So values within being a director feeds into the whole, you've got to be courageous is one, right?
Yeah.
You can't sit on the fence, you have to act. Are there other sort of things around values that you would like to get directors more aware of? Both personal and professional values, which should ideally be the same.
Yeah. Well, another one which is very, very dear to me is actually it's probity. In South Africa, we more use integrity, but integrity can apply to inanimate object. Being an engineer, I can talk about the integrity of our construction. It's not going to fall down. But probity requires being human. It's typical to us. And that's why I think we should actually, it's one of the things we should propagate. Talk more about probity and less about integrity because it's more fundamental. Probity also does not accept any lapse. It has to happen every time, all the time.
Yeah.
For big things, for small things. That's my philosophy.
Coming sort of from that piece where properties that also sort of includes sort of honesty and decency and these kind of things. What if you are on a dysfunctional board? What dysfunctional board generally, how can you ever be quick to handle these sort of corporate psychopaths that pops up now and then? And that's a very strong word, I know, but it's an area that I think needs to be put up because it lifts its head in so many places, and especially in the boardroom, maybe.
Yes, and unfortunately, the corporate psychopaths are alive and well. I think there are many of them, and even today, many boards are still dysfunctional, and that's exactly an area where mentoring can help. It's virtually it's impossible to fight it by yourself. You need to be well equipped in order not only to survive there, but to thrive and be happy. And that's also, and the dysfunctionality could have all sorts of aspects. I remember in one of these American series, there was the main character, a lady, was invited to serve on a board which was purely male and not very nice people. And the first meeting, she goes there, and there is a black gentleman, and they introduce each other. And she says, I'm so and so, I'm the woman. And he says, I'm the black. And the beauty of that is that immediately they were allies.
Yeah.
So to answer your question, how do we behave with a bunch of psychopaths? One at a time, we create alliances.
Yeah.
Then we are not allowed. And when somebody tries to shut you down, one of your allies will say, but listen to Charlotte. She has, what she's saying is actually quite interesting, gives you time to come in.
I think creating alliances is really super important, but you can, of course, get situations where there's too many alliances and it all becomes a bit, decisions are made outside of the boardroom as opposed to inside the boardroom, depending on how good you are at making alliances. But I would agree that it's quite key, which is why time out of the boardroom is so important as well, where you get to know each other a bit better and have a chance to relate in different ways, I guess. But yeah, and definitely mentoring. I certainly over the years have needed support and mentoring around creating alliances. It doesn't come that natural to me because I feel in a boardroom we're all mature or adult people, right? So we are there to lead a company, and that's what people focus on. But there are lots of self agendas going on in boardrooms often, and in the executive groups, because there's a lot of things at stake. So mentoring is certainly good for that, because you need someone to lean on that can give you that neutral input into how to handle potential psychopaths around you. So how do you think directors' mindset can shift from sort of profit and into our, people, planet, and prosperity? Do you think that's possible? Because that's a big discussion we're having in many places today, and I would think that mentoring around that would be very helpful.
Yeah, very much so. If you look at all these scandals that are around the world, and even recent one, like the Boeing one, is only a couple of years old, it's purely due to misled greed, I would say, but very deep greed. Steinhoff's also. These are very recent, so we still have a long way to go to correct that. But unfortunately, we can only correct that one at a time.
Yeah.
But I've found that, we often focus on how bad things can develop very quickly. But my own experience is that good things can develop even quicker.
Sure.
I spent more than a quarter of a century turning organizations around. And I was amazed on how powerful you can be as a CEO to change, because people are looking at you, including the mindset. You can take a completely corrupt organization and make it to behave like they should in an amazing time. People always amaze me how ready, if they are given the right direction, they will go there. You just need to be a bit assertive, but there won't be much resistance, actually.
Well, I guess generally people want to have good leaders they can follow, and they can serve as well. And I think everyone instinctively knows if they have a good leader or a less good leader in front of them. I don't think we can hide that well. Eventually it will shine through, whether we're there for ourselves or for the greater good, and for our staff and the people around us. So yeah, I think that movement that has generally started, where we look beyond the profit and into the sort of the social aspect, the environmental aspect, and people's voices are a lot bigger, right? I mean, technology has helped that. So do you feel that the whole ESG movement is helping, but do you feel that also the current group of directors need help themselves with actually getting along with that movement?
No, I think it's definitely gaining traction. There's no question about that. And don't make me wrong. I think it's good to make money. Companies must be profitable, otherwise they're not in the game. But, you know, famous people like, for instance, David Packard in 1965, which is a long time ago, already recognized that the purpose of a company cannot be to make money. No. The purpose of the company must be to have an impact on society, on the
positive
community
impact, ideally.
So you see that 35, 55 years ago, it's gaining traction. We went through the triple P, we went through the 6 capitals, and I could see it battled to your sleeping. Now suddenly ESG comes at the right time, at the right place. So I'm not sure why, but it's delightful to say that now it's really getting traction. People are talking about it and they're doing it.
I have to say, when I have conversations with sort of under 35-year-olds, they tend to be different, naturally different. They have a different focus. And I'm thinking that a lot of the younger generations now are actually pushing in with the ways that are beyond profit in their thinking, which is why I always have reverse mentors, because there's a different mindset growing up that isn't in my generation, like from 50 and up. And you have 2 different kind of conversations, even in interviews, where the conversation with sort of under 35-year-olds would be about purpose and values and impact, but there will not be, over 50-year-olds will not talk that language. It will be about very different things that are correlated, but not the key thing. So I think a lot of it is driven from the younger generations, which is why what you're doing and bringing in certainly, you know, new leaders with that new language, if you want, is helping massively push this wave ahead. And I think that's super important. But with that comes also sort of very much trust, in my opinion, trust between the generations, but also trust between leaders and the people that are following the leaders. So I'm always looking at the trust equation, where you have to be trustworthy, you have to be reliable and credible and able to be intimate and keep confidentiality. But all of that gets eroded by your self-interest. So the bigger your self-interest is, the less trustworthy you will be. And I think society today, and especially the younger generation, gets that and live by that. But do the older generations do that? Are there some of the 50 plus directors that need mentoring in this area, do you feel?
They probably, yes, indeed. Also, I think on what you just said, I think to me there is often a misunderstanding about what trust is about. So if you ask me, should you trust somebody? I say, well, I don't know. Apply the old ABC rule, you know, accept nothing, believe no one, check everything. That doesn't mean become absolutely paranoid. On the contrary, you say do trust, but verify, close the loop. And that's probably what the people of my generation have been lacking. They trust or don't trust. I found that the younger generation are more structured. They would actually not take it at face value. They would check. they would verify. And that's one of the beauties of having boards that are more diverse, that are becoming younger.
It's interesting because for me personally, and that verifies what you just said, for me, I trust people until the opposite has been proven. So when I meet someone new, they have 100% trust for me, and it's theirs to lose. But it's also theirs to keep by just being decent people, honest, transparent, you know. And I think that can't be that difficult, but actually, I have got burnt a few times because I'm trusting people that are actually not trustworthy, and maybe some more due diligence or questions, or using the ABC, assume nothing, believe no one, check everything, would have helped me. I don't know. But it's almost like I want to be allowed to be people naive. And it is probably people naive, but I like to be allowed to trust that people are good up front, and then allow them to continue to fulfill that or not. And then my problem, of course, is when trust then has been eroded, it's virtually impossible for me to regain it again. So that's something I need to work on, maybe with a mentor.
I think what's important is to gain more than what you lose. I'm also basically a trustee person, and I was taken for a ride many times, but I think I won more often than I lost. That's on a personal point of view. When you are on a board, and I mentioned the Steinhoff case, the excuse of the director is, no, we were trusting the CEO. That is fundamentally wrong.
Yeah.
That's not trust.
As a director, you can't. No.
That's gullibility mixed with greed. It's not trust.
Yeah, no. And also the directors are there to get assurances, right? Assurances that what they are being told is actually correct. And I think that you can't just say, well, I was told, so I trusted that everything was right. But on the other hand, if you lose that trust, for me as a director, my problem then becomes I want to double check everything, and I dig in very deeply, possibly too deep, where in fact what we need to do is have a different conversation, a courageous conversation about why is it now I don't trust you? And then go through that until we end up in a place where we can either regain the trust, and if that's not possible, from what I have experienced, then people need to leave. Some people stay and some people leave, and sometimes I had to leave and sometimes other people had to leave. But you can't be on a board and not trust each other and not trust the information you get. And then I really think that you have to be, as what you started out saying, being courageous is absolutely key. You can't just hide away, right, on a board and sit and feel untrusting. How long time would you give from your experience on a board when you have lost trust in the information you get? How long should we try to fix it? A year, 2 years? I have sort of very set formula for what I do. I'm just curious to hear what you feel is the right way to go.
I think the best way is to make sure it doesn't happen. And
Indeed. But once it has happened, you go, oh.
You mentioned values, and I think probably when you feel that things are slipping, maybe you should say, okay, guys, let's all take a deep breath and let's redefine our values. Do we have values that are compatible? Can we really work together? Is that okay? Because values can sometimes be very different. And at the same time, the feeling of trust could be very different. Let me, if I may tell you a short personal story. One of the companies that I turned around, everything was working great, and the company which was bankrupt was now doing well. But we came to a situation where the board, or the majority of the board, wanted to do something that to me was bribery. It was definitely fundamentally dishonest. And CEO, I was in a position to block it, and I made sure it didn't happen.
Very good.
So the next thing I have is that I'm called at a special board meeting, and I'm told that you haven't got the trust of the board anymore. And they fired me on the spot.
Wow.
That was it.
So that was their thanks for you to stop corruption.
So, yeah, okay, so that
Lovely.
corruption didn't happen, but their set of values was, it was okay to take a bribe. It was totally incompatible with my set of values. It's not okay.
No.
Okay.
And I think in those cases, right, you have to stand up for your values, because otherwise you lose your integrity, right?
No, you still have to look at yourself when you shave in the morning if you are a man, or when you put your makeup on if you're a woman. So
that's right.
No, that's not negotiable. But that's why something very important is to make your due diligence before you accept a board position, making sure that you are compatible there and you are going to be happy there.
Because as soon as it's not, it becomes a very difficult relationship. And I've always attempted to do that, but I still I think I've served on about, 25 different boards the last 15 years, and only 3 of them didn't go so well. And I had to leave after 2 years. So I don't mind working with a board that's a bit out of whack, right? But I will maximum give it 2 years. And of course, if anything occurs that is directly against my values, I will step off straight away. But if after 2 years, a board really can't, and the executives can't really get their head around running business with honesty and transparency and the values that I adhere to, then I can't stay. I have to leave. And I think some directors will stay because of the prestige in having a position, of the income from it. And I think those kind of things, as directors, you have to be a good enough leader to understand that those are not the kind of things that should keep you on the board, right? Because people see us, they see us today. Board members used to be hidden. Board members are not hidden anymore, right? They see us with technology, everything is out there. So it's not the reason for doing the right thing. We should do the right thing even if people don't see us. But it will become very public potentially if we don't do the right thing. And so there's many reputational and all kinds of things that comes into the picture. Even if we allow another board member to misbehave, because we are part of it, and we might sit on the fence, but as you said, actually, there is no such thing in a board as sitting on the fence. We are part of also what other board members do. So have you experienced in your mentoring these kind of things being discussed where people really needed some help with figuring out difficult situations on boards?
Yes, well, definitely. Definitely. Particularly for younger people, it's actually quite a challenge to end up on a board. They dream of it, but it's not coming. So when it comes, there is such a temptation to say, yes, I want it, I'll grab it. And it really requires a lot of help to say, okay, let's cool down. Are you going to be happy there? Or is it going to be, and indeed, when I had actually many cases where people had accepted pretty blindly positions, and then they realized that not only the board was dysfunctional, but it was dysfunctional in a way that was clashing with their fundamental values. Yeah. And as you just said, no, you can't live with that. Not possible. So
you can try for peer, and this is why I'm thinking setting a time limit where you say, well, I will work to influence for like 1 year or 2 years. And if you can't influence for it to be closer to your own values, then I think you just gotta leave, because it's going to be so unhappy for everyone to be there, right?
Yeah, no, well, indeed, but you're right. We must give it a fair chance to change, because sometimes it's ignorance. You know, in spite of all the publicity, many directors are still stuck in the 20th century, and even people with decades of experience as director, they still believe that their mission is to make the shareholders happy.
Yeah,
they haven't gone to the next step.
No, and I think it will take another decade before we clear that out, and that's simply by natural rotation, and by, you know, people getting older, and there are some states they won't serve on boards anymore. I mean, I'm thinking that by the time I'm 70, I'm probably done in that space, because it's then you have lots of experience to advise from, but I think there's always different sort of limits. People were very busy telling me when I started serving on board at 42, they said, "Oh, you're far too young to serve on boards." And I was like, well, I'm here, so you know what, piss off. But maybe I didn't say it just like that, but I'm certainly thinking that. But, by then I had worked for 35 years. I mean, who are they to say that I'm too young, right? What is too young? What is it? I would like to see people in their 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s on boards, as many different decades as possible within the same board. But what actually happens on many boards is that they're in the same decade. So they're all in their 50s or 60s or even 70s, because they feel more comfortable. So I'm from the 60s, and it's like, oh, we can all remember the same music and the same things that went on and what have you. And we draw that with us throughout life. But it's not right to sit all of us in our 50s on a board, right? We need to be that variety. And when we bring someone in their 30s, they can bring a lot to the table that we don't even think about. The cognitive diversity you get by that is absolutely key in today's world. We have to acknowledge that the younger generations are carrying knowledge and insights that we just don't have.
Yeah.
And that are virtually impossible for us to gain, because we haven't been born into, having a phone in our hand and having access to all that information out there. They have learned naturally to filter information, to do all kinds of things with it. I'm still being told off by my children, by reading something, say, "Oh, look at this." I said, "Oh, Mom, you've got to check the source, you've got to do this." I was like, what? So absolutely bringing that to the fore, I think, is key. I'm mindful of time, and I like to leave some time to also go through some questions. So just before we do that, Patrice, what is the key message that you would like our delegates to take away before we go to the questions?
I think that the most important thing, because being a director is great, and both you and I love that as our profession, but it's not the only one. So as a last word, what I would say, make sure you choose the right dream and define your dream. And once you have defined what you really love and what you will be really the best at, go for it. It doesn't matter what it is. I already had a number of people who, when they understood what it meant to be a director, they told me, "No, I don't want that." That's not to told me, because today, being a director, there is no glory in that. It's not an ego booster or anything, it's just another profession. We must understand that. So my word is, go for your dream, make it. And people live longer now and are healthy younger. So careers are younger. Longer, sorry, not younger.
And maybe you have several of them, like several different careers.
I'm currently on my career number 4. So yes,
that's right. I'm on my 3rd one now. So yeah, absolutely.
But you are much younger than I am, so you still have time.
Maybe I'll have a number 4. Thank you so much for that, Patrice. I'm just looking at some of the comments in the chat, and one of the latest ones was, "What's your view on bridging the age gap by having a shadow board? Have you been in organizations that have used them, like of younger people, for example? Is that something you have experienced?"
Uh, no, I've not, and I don't encourage it. I'm not sure what it would happen. It's different. It's a different, and it's actually one of the challenges. Being an executive and being a director are two completely different things. And it's sometimes difficult to accept. You have been an executive for 20 years. Suddenly you end up as a director. Now you have full responsibility, but you can't touch anymore.
That's right. You have to shift. You have to leave your functionality outside the door and be a director.
So I'm not sure what a shadow board. The only place I've seen it is the organization like municipalities. But I haven't heard of one for a long time. I don't think it really worked that well.
I've come across some that are setting up like under 35 shadow boards where they have younger people, but they would generally call them advisory boards. So that would be younger people, both from within the organization and from outside of the organization, to hear their take on some of the more strategic things that the board, so they give input to the board effectively. I haven't had an organization myself who does that. But what I do have, of course, is Board Apprentice, which is an organization I started almost 10 years ago, where we encourage the boards to reserve a seat at the table for education. And we are running on 4 different continents now, but that's effectively, you will be an observer for a year, but be treated as a board member, get the board packs, be in all the meetings, be at the dinners, everything. So you get a really strong feeling of what does it mean to be a board member, but also what can I provide to the board? Which conversations could I really deliver something in? And I think by being in the room, it demystifies it and it makes you better prepared to be a director once you are, and actually you have all your liabilities with you in this situation. You're learning from the masters, hence why we call it apprentices. It seems to work well. We have over 75% become board members because they get that confidence. So it's another way to shadow, but we try to not use the word shadow, as in UK we have shadow directorship, which means that if you influence the board, you take full liability for everything, but without the voting rights or being paid for it. So another one says, can we encourage potential managers to subscribe to the institutions like IODSA in Mansai, especially if we want to breed good future directors? I think personally that we should encourage that. I don't know, what do you think, Patrice? What's your experiences with direct institutions?
So yeah, I didn't really get the question, Charlotte. Sorry.
So they're saying whether we should encourage potential like executives to subscribe to institutions like IOD, the Institute of Directors in South Africa, so that they can be getting the help there. And then another one is adding a question to say, do the Institute of Directors provide the support directors are actually looking for?
Yes, okay, no, sir. Sorry, the answer is an emphatic yes. I would definitely, and particularly if you look at organizations like this one, the Good Governance Academy, I would certainly encourage people, go and listen to these webinars. You are going to learn a lot. And there are many, almost every country, a similar one. So yes, I would, as a first learning to become a director, this is a magnificent way. I think it's probably, in my book, more efficient than having a shadow organization. Also, being a member of these professional organizations puts you in contact with the people who are going to eventually invite you to join them. So you need to live with them. You need to interface with them to make yourself visible. So yes, please join.
Yeah, no, I think that is true. And I think some of the takeaway from many of these professional organizations is exactly what you just said. You meet people that are directors and that could be helpful for you to know and understand. And even if you're just observing them, I mean, if you are surrounded by directors in an organization and you are not comfortable with them, maybe it's not the right place for you to be. And I think it's very important to understand that who are directors. It's anyone. It should be able to be anyone, right? But the cohort that is currently around that you will be joining a board with, it's good to understand that you can actually get along with them.
It's quite possible, yeah.
Yeah, so I think, so I don't know if it's possible to have delegates actually asking questions, Caroline, in sort of open forum, or what?
Yes, we can do that.
Because I think I have covered the ones I can see in the chat.
Yes, so it is open for discussions. I have a question, if that's okay. It was something that I've come across recently, where people have accepted a directorship position, but they feel inadequate, and they feel too young or naive for the board. I wonder if you've got some guidance and advice for them in terms of, standing up and being part of the board.
Patrice, over to you.
Thank you. Well, first of all, I would do two things. I would say, okay, let's first discuss what it is. What are you looking for? And let's find out what your strengths are, what it is that you can bring in such an environment. And then I would say, well, go for it. Charlotte, you mentioned that your first directorship was at 42. Well, that's great. I think it's a splendid age to start. You can start younger, but it's certainly not too young. It's perfect. And right now, and I would encourage it for another reason, is that look at the time it took us to admit that it was a good idea to have women in boards, to have a mixed group there. Okay, now it's snowballing, sometimes a bit too fast in some areas, but that's okay. I don't have any problem with that. But that is actually what I found, the sort of feedback I get from my mentees is that they tell me, you gave me the strength to be who I wanted to be. And I found that's probably the best compliment they could ever give me.
Fantastic compliment. That's exactly what mentoring should do, is to live. You effectively create that environment around your mentees so that they can succeed more. Yeah. Which is fantastic, and that's exactly what an experienced mentor can do. I think in that. I think if people come in and feel inadequate or are unsure, it could also be imposter syndrome, right? Where actually they are completely adequate, they are good enough, and they need to trust also that people, if you go in and people hire you on the things you have told them you can do, and you have been truthful on that, then you need to trust that they can judge whether they feel you can do the job or not. I have a lot of women, for example, who say, we don't want to be chosen because we're women. And I was like, well, believe you me, nobody's going to do that, because we're all in it with our full personal liabilities. Who would want someone just because they're a woman, but they have no skills they bring to the table? I mean, nobody will do that. And I never had that issue. I also kind of say, well, do you think men ever had the problem when it was only men that got chosen? Do you think they ever stopped and thought, I don't want this because I'm a man? Well, but that's it, right? You're getting it partly because you're a man, because the other half of the population in the world is not even taken into consideration. So, but I don't think any man ever questioned that within themselves. So why should women do that, right? We need to trust that other people can also look at what we bring, and that is enough, and then hold ourselves in that belief, and then have a good mentor to talk to when it goes wrong.
No, indeed. But also, don't be worried about being scared. I can assure you that every new job, when I became CEO of a new company, I was absolutely terrified. But I kept it inside, but because I had no idea whether I would make it or not, you know. And you have to jump in the water, close your nose and
Either you swim or you sink. Yeah.
And most of the time it works well.
And also it's the times where you push yourself out of your comfort zone, right? That's where you really grow. That's where the growth happen. When you're comfortable, you don't grow. You're just comfortable. You just stay in the same place. When you feel really uncomfortable, you have a massive opportunity for growth. Also, when you meet people that totally disagree with you, you have a massive opportunity for growth. Always welcome disagreements, because it really is your chance to grow, to understand someone else's viewpoint, maybe even accept that I was wrong. Gosh, I just learned something new. That's okay. It's good. You've just grown. You are now more than you were before someone challenged you. So I really want to turn upside down disagreements and challenges, because they're good. Even privately, we need to always challenge each other, I think, in a good, respectful way, of course. But that's how we grow, and that's how we learn more, both about ourselves and about other people.
Yeah, I think, Charlotte, that's vital. That's what I put under the umbrella of courage, is that don't hesitate to ask the right question, to give your opinion. Yeah. If you know that the other people will disagree, that mustn't stop you. If you believe in it, okay, we remain polite but we put our case, and that's very, very important. And a number of times you have people after a meeting, they come to you and say, I wanted to say that, but I don't think they would have liked it.
I get so irritated with that. That's so why didn't you say that in the room then? Right?
Yeah, indeed, go back to the room and say it.
Or at least back up when someone else.
Is mentoring just for individuals, or can you mentor a whole board? Maybe Charlotte, we can start with you.
I absolutely feel you can mentor a whole board, and I've tried to put that into a concept, because I've been asked by a couple of boards, would I come and have conversations with them over dinner, for example, 4 times a year, whatever. And I thought, actually, I didn't at that time really have time for it, because I'm a single mom with 3 kids, but they're now all off in university, so time is opening up. That is a great way of just having a conversation where you help other people by parting. I mean, like Patrice, if you met up with a board 4 times a year and shared some of all your knowledge and experience, that would be massively important to the board, right? I think I do have knowledge and experience as well that I can part with that will help them just do better, being more effective, being that neutral friend that comes in and says, actually, maybe if you thought of this, it could be better or easier, to go through discussions or make the right decision. So I think that's something to be said for mentoring whole boards, for sure. Patrice, your input on that.
I agree with you, Charlotte. I could not have put it better. I do, most of my clients are individual, but I was fortunate enough to be able to actually mentor complete boards. And I found that's the most rewarding, because you take a situation that is often very confrontational, and you really change it completely. And you could see the smiles on the face, physically, actually, often on the face of the people, because they feel more comfortable, they feel more appreciated. Yeah. And it's particularly, to me, the ideal client is actually a very diverse board, because that's where you really get an incredible dynamics there. And that's where you create an environment where people don't feel threatened. Yeah. They can really open, they know there won't be penalty because they don't agree with
Yeah.
the rest. As long as they have a reasonable case, they will be listened to. So yes, mentoring works very much in group, not too big. I've found that about 12-ish is about the maximum. If you have a group of 9, 10, that's great. What I've never tried is a group of 2 or 3. I'm not sure what that would do, but I got groups of up to 14, and that I could feel was really the limit.
I've got a last question for the two of you.
Can I just say just very quickly,
yes.
Carolyn, sorry, just touching on something that Patrice just said. I think safety, psychological safety comes up again and again in many discussions I have, especially within the neurodivergent community that I'm also part of. And I think we should be free to be able to say, I now don't feel psychologically safe. And with everything that contains. And then it's for the board or the team you're in to then go into it and say, let's look at why and what we can do so that we are back in a place where we all feel psychologically safe. Super important. Sorry.
It's a very, exceptionally important point. I think that psychological safety is a fundamental, and it goes to the trust, doesn't it? That you mentioned earlier. So the last question is really around psychometric testing and these insights and all of those kinds of assessment, personality assessment tools. Do you place reliance on those before going into mentoring a board or a person? Maybe start with you, Charlotte, and then Patrice can end off.
Okay. I have for some years tried to encourage boards to do psychometric testing or do personality testing so we can uncover what kind of personalities we have on the board in a way to understand each other better. We can't do that through conversations, and this is why time outside of the boardroom is super important, why you get to know each other better in that way. But through a personality type or whatever people like, the Myers-Briggs, for example, is one that I think really uncovers people's personalities in a good way. It will help us help each other because we understand each other better. I mean, now when I go into a board and say, okay, I'm also autistic, people go, oh, and some people's biases will go, well, but you don't look autistic, or whatever they come out with of things that they don't do to offend me, but that happens to be a bit offensive. It's because it's not well known that you can be successful and autistic. It's so those kind of things, again, if I didn't feel able to put that to the table, that's kind of a problem. I mean, even it doesn't really matter because I'm so public about it, so everybody knows. But you know what I mean? It could be all kind of different characteristics that are not visible, that when you let each other know that you have different characteristics or different neurotypes, I think the understanding, if I'm a bit too direct, people will get it, right? That, okay, that was sort of because I'm autistic and it's just what we do, right? Or because I'm Danish, it could also be that. So, do you see what I mean? I think it helps knowing more rather than less about the people you make very important decisions with and where you share all the responsibility for that.
Thank you, Charlotte. Last point from your side, Patrice.
Yeah, I actually use these tests very much the same way as Charlotte. Is more to define the strengths of the people, and I use it in 2 ways. Well, one is that actually the one I'm using currently, but I've used probably 24 different ones. The one I prefer right now is a strengths finder, because it only gives you your 5 top strengths, and it's absolutely non-threatening. And the second aspect that we have by using that is look at the diversity of that group. And it's particularly evident when you want to hire new directors. We make a spreadsheet with the people and the 34 strengths, and we look at where there is a blank. And we said, okay, that's where we need to find somebody who has these strengths. But I certainly consider these profiles as a starting talking piece. It's definitely not, they must never be taken at face value.
Right.
It's only an opinion.
Well, thank you very much, both of you. It's been a fantastic, fascinating event. I think we didn't really, going into this, we didn't understand the depths of all of this thinking. So thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate having you online, Charlotte, and you, Patrice. And of course, the course is available on the website. It has been endorsed by the Good Governance Academy. So go and have a look at our website. And then this YouTube video would be available on the event page as well. Thank you very much again, Charlotte, and thank you, Patrice.
Thank you, Caroline, and thank you, Charlotte.
Thank
Great.
you.